Welcome to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement, a podcast where we dive into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the law enforcement officer.
Minor injury accident, the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
All right, welcome back to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Vernon Phillips, and today on the show, we've got a couple of gentlemen from a training group. We've got Jason and Ed, and they are going to just explain kind of who they are, their backgrounds, kind of what they do before we jump into specifically their training group and what they provide. So, Jason and Ed, I'm going to turn over you guys, let you guys each have an opportunity to share who you are, just kind of your background and things like that, and then we'll jump into some conversation.
You want me to go first? All right. My name's Ed Lowry. I've been with the sheriff's office running on 19 years now. But prior to that, I spent 21 years, 7 months and 16 days in the United States Army as an airborne ranger. After I retired from the military, I went right into law enforcement. I've been there ever since. The current positions that I've held at the sheriff's office has been detective, property crimes, patrol sergeant or patrol deputy, FTO, and I'm currently working as a training coordinator for the sheriff's office, which I've been doing that about 8 years now.
All right, Jason, you're up, man.
My name's Jason. I work for a sheriff's office in Central Florida. I'll try not to hit the table that shakes it. This is my 19th year with this agency. Been last probably 12 years working narcotics on a federal task force. Firearms instructor for 12 plus years with the agency. Known Ed for almost 19, 20 years. Back in 2016, I kind of noticed that there was, in my opinion, like a hole in the market or a need for a certain type of training specifically for concealed carry. From what I was seeing, I'd go to a gun show or I'd, hear people's stories about the training they received for concealed carry, and it was barely any training, if at all. I mean, some weren't even firing a gun. So I started a company called Parabellum Training Group in 2016, and primarily just did concealed carry stuff. So it wasn't a whole lot of shooting. It was just legal aspects of it, safe handling of firearms, basic fundamental stuff. And then every now and then I do like a more shooting based class, but I got two girls, 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So for the last 13 years, that's been, taking up quite a bit of my time. So that kind of went to the wayside, that and career stuff. But just recently, me and Ed have hooked up and partnered up. We're co-owners of the business. Ed's looking at retirement here in the next few months. And so this year we've really stepped it up. And because of the way the laws have changed here in Florida, where we have basically constitutional carry, there's not a whole lot of need or desire or want in the market for specific concealed carry training. But there is for actual marksmanship and firearms training. So we've put together a couple classes that are pretty good in demand locally. We've had success teaching law enforcement and civilians. They're designed primarily for law enforcement, but they have a lot of benefits and carryover to the civilian market. So we've been rolling pretty good, about a month of class since January, or a class a month since January. So we don't have anything till December this year, but we're looking to speed it up and do more frequent classes once he's retired.
We're increasing the size of our range and doing some work on the range, so we're going to scale back after our December class. I think January, February timeframe, we get our range done and we'll be able to move forward, putting a lot of classes on.
So, all right, and I want to kind of unpack some of that as we move on, but I want to jump back to just getting a little bit more kind of your guys' take on kind of where we are currently with law enforcement and kind of some of the things that you guys see and some of the things that we may need to work on moving forward. But so both of you guys, sounds like you started around the same time.
Yeah,
so pretty close. Yeah,
I got hired in 05.
06.
Yeah.
Okay. And I started in 07, so we're all kind of right,
5 to
kind of right there. So,
7.
so when you guys kind of look back over your career, I mean, obviously, one of the biggest things is we want to talk about taking care of ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So, I mean, obviously, you guys are deep into your career. You guys got a lot of experience. You got a lot of background there. So, what is it that you've done, over your career, especially in the last several years, as you kind of get older, more experience, to kind of maintain that overall, that overall balance in your life, to make sure that you're not kind of one-sided. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, I've learned over the years, and probably a lot to do with the military training that I received, in the Army, is being able to just turn it off when I leave work. When I come home, my family doesn't have a clue of some of the stuff that I've seen or I've done, and I don't really want them to hear all of that. I'm sure my wife would listen attentively, and but not understanding what law enforcement, the guys out on the road, face on a daily basis. Most civilians don't, and it's just a myriad of emotions, and just you see the worst of the worst, and that can wear you down. So if you don't know how to turn it off or have an outlet to recoup after a long day or a long week, or the same old stuff every day, then it does affect you. It can beat you down. And so just things, special hobbies. One of the things I like to do is I make my own knives. Not for selling or anything like that. Just going out and pounding on metal, man, that's a stress reliever in and of itself. Of course, I have my faith. I'm strong in my faith, and I have that, and that's something that I can share with the family. And just things like that is what helps me through it.
Thank you, Ed.
Passing it off.
Uh,
No, it's the same way. I mean, similar things. I mean, I'm big in outdoors. I love the thing with me and my job is I love it. Like it's not even really work. I always tell people like that I'm the luckiest guy at my agency.
Yeah, they pay us to do it.
Yeah, and just having the opportunity to be sent to these high level training courses and get trained by people that are just wizards compared to people we get to see and be around every day, and just also the experience of the guys we get to work with. So I mean I've been off patrol for 11 years. Of course see stuff still, but I've never really struggled with a whole lot of it. I've got a strong family. Like I said, I got 2 little girls that keep me busy, and fishing, hunting, shooting. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of time to worry about that kind of stuff. And we've been lucky. I mean, I haven't had an officer. I wasn't involved in officer involved shooting or anything like that. So just your run of the mill stuff you see in this job, but just friends and hobbies are my biggest outlets. So.
yeah, and that's important. I mean, that's what a lot of people, especially in the law enforcement community, don't do, is run so outside of the job. They don't have something else that they set up and have. So I mean, obviously, you've got your training group you guys are doing on the side, so you've got something else that you're doing. So your main focus just isn't your job. It hasn't become, your entire life. And so making sure you got those things you plug yourself into outside of the profession is huge, right? And that's what we want. We want to encourage people like, hey, look, it's great if this is your calling and this is what you do, but have something else. Ed talks about being able to turn it off, and then going out and making sure that he's investing in his family, but not taking on everything that he has and then putting it on them, right? Because then that's not doing any justice to them. It's okay to share with our significant others. Our wives, like, hey, this is today was kind of a rough day. and without having to go into details and particulars. But having a hobby is a huge outlet. Being able to go out, like Ed, you say, you're making knives. That's a great hobby. That's a great way to take some of that stuff and channel that into a productive, outlet. And same thing with you, Jason. I mean, going out and being, the outdoorsman you are, put yourself into that, and then also you guys got your training group. So I think that is a great outlet for you guys to be able to kind of offset just the stress of the job, because there are days that it can be pretty heavy, even in your current roles now, right? I mean, both of you kind of been off of patrol for a while, but it doesn't mean that you don't interact or have days where it's heavier than others. So
and that's one thing I helping instruct with the agency and teaching in general. When we see these new officers, these new deputies, and it's easy for me because like I've been away from that patrol side of it for so long that I'm not walking around with my blue line bracelet and like screaming, "Hey, I'm a cop." And I try to tell them, like, without being rude, I'm like, I'm glad you're enthusiastic about this job, like you should be, but also like don't let it just envelop you and be the definition of who you are. I mean, have friends that aren't on this job. Like I love the guys I work with. Some of the best friends I've ever met in my life been through this job, but also I've got best friend that's an electrician, another dude that's an engineer, and there's no wall that prevents us from talking about stuff. I mean, I remember when I first came on, it was like, oh, you can only hang out with other cops. Like those are the only people you associate with. And that's not the case. I mean, that's my biggest thing when I talk to these young guys. I'm like, don't let it consume you. I mean, it's a job. I mean, for sure, and it's a really great job, but don't let it define you. Don't let it be everything you are. So we see that a lot, especially with the newer guys.
Yeah, I think that's important because what happens when it's gone? And that's the thing. I mean, in today's community, and that can happen in one decision you make, right? It could be your entire life. It could be everything you've invested into. And because of a decision or an incident or some type of circumstances, whether it's on the job or outside of the job, that can be over. And then you're left with what? If that's where you put all your time and your focus, like, hey, this is who I am. But now what are you left with? So
Exactly.
I think that's a great thing, especially when we get some of the seasoned guys that invest in some of the newer guys. I think that's important. I think both of you are in a good position to do that, especially Ed. I mean, you're in a great position to do that because they're coming through seeing you so much, and then Jason, with you kind of helping instruct with firearms stuff, you're going to come in contact with them, and they need good seasoned officers to be able to invest into them, kind of point them on the right track. Because I think that sometimes that's where we mess up, right? Where we kind of just continue this old school indoctrination where we don't really give people the opportunity to kind of say, hey, look, it's okay if you want to be like, hey, I just need a minute, or it's okay to have a life outside of the profession, right? It's okay to not have all your friends just be cops. Because that's what we tend to do, right? We tend to you get in the group and all of your friends are work friends. And then instead of getting together and talking about things other than the profession, you get around and you start talking about the profession. Sometimes that's good, right? You talk a little bit of shop, but then usually it gets involved in, policies and politics and, who's doing what and who's not doing what and what supervisor is better than the other. And then that, and that's not healthy for anybody, right? And then,
No.
So I'm glad to hear that. So when you guys kind of look back over your career, what is? I'll give you the option. So what is one of either the most awkward calls for service you've ever worked, or yeah, and hey, and it's open, all right. So you don't gotta sugarcoat it. And or what is one of the harder calls you've worked, and then how did you get on the other side of that? So I'll give you the option to weigh in on which one you want to tackle.
There's one call that for service that I can give you that it was probably the worst call for service that I've ever had to deal with, and I've dealt with quite a few things. I mean, I've seen death in a whole manner of different ways. All of it's ugly, but the one death that bothered me the most was that of a child. I responded to a call where a child had drowned in the swimming pool, and when I got there, the mother was just holding on to the child, and she had the phone on 911, and she wasn't listening to the operator talking to her. And so I asked her to give me the child, and she gave me the child, and I started CPR right away. I can remember when I was given the breaths, that it was like sticking my head in a 5-gallon bucket of water, just blowing bubbles. You could hear the water gurgling in the lungs, and in that moment, I just thought, man, if I could just pick this child up by her ankles and hold her upside down and drain the water out, maybe I could get a few good breaths of air and, save a life. But that's not what I was trained to do. And so I didn't do it. I just kept talking myself through the procedures of CPR until the ambulance got there. When they got there, they whisked her up and took her out of there, and I followed them to the hospital, where they worked on her for another hour, doing the same things that I was doing, with a little bit more involved, obviously. But the child passed away, didn't make it. And I remember being really frustrated, really mad, because not only was I trained to give CPR and all of that stuff, but I'm an instructor in it. I train other deputies to do it, and it didn't work. I know I did it right, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I could just hold her upside down and drain the water out, I might could save a life. And I didn't do that. And so in the back of my mind, I was thinking, man, if I'd only done that, And, my wife's a nurse. And so I called her immediately and I said, this is what happened. I need to tell you about it. And this is why I'm frustrated. And I told her, and she goes, Ed, did they teach you to do that when you went through the training? And I said, nope. He says, well, I tell you, there's a reason they didn't teach you to do that, because it wouldn't work. Because gravity doesn't just affect the water, it affects everything internally, and it would have clogged the hole that the water would have come out. And that made sense to me, but I wasn't thinking that way at the time. And then I got off the phone with her, and dispatch called me. They said, hey, are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm just a little frustrated, and told them a little bit about what I was thinking. And they said, well, just so you know, not for nothing, you talked yourself through that whole situation out loud, and it's all recorded. And you did it right. You did everything right. And I said, well, it didn't work. And she said, with all the variables that you don't know about, I mean, you couldn't have known how long the child was in the water. You couldn't have known how long the child had not been breathing. Those variables you were up against, and you didn't even know them. And sometimes it just doesn't work. You can do it all right, and it just doesn't work. But you did it right. And so I had to hang my hat on that one, because outside of that, I was just frustrated. I was just, for the next day or two, I was kind of quiet. My wife, she was good about, hey, it's all right. It's all right. And, after that, I mean, I was okay. I was able to move past it. But in my mind, that's probably one of the most significant event that I dealt with, even though there's been some others that didn't affect me like this one, just because what I did didn't work. The other things that I've seen, the dead bodies, all of that stuff, there wasn't nothing to be done. This one I was instrumental in the process of trying to save his life. It just didn't work out. That kind of bothered me for a few days. But I got past it.
Yeah. And that's understandable. I mean, and anybody in your situation, and anybody, reasonable minded would look at that and have a hard time with that, right? I think there's a lot of times in law enforcement that people, well, both people on the inside and the outside, right? They have this idea that, things in law enforcement or the calls for services sometimes you deal with aren't going to affect you, right? That somehow you get into the profession and automatically turns off your human emotion. Well, that's not true, right? Especially when it comes to pediatric calls. You guys know me. I talk to a lot of different people, and I've got a lot of people that reach out to me, and a lot of them stem from the pediatric calls, because those are the ones that are some of the hardest to deal with, because we look at that and like, hey, this isn't how it's supposed to go, right? You doing CPR and the child's still not make it, like, in our minds and everything we believe, right, in how our moral code, we're like, this isn't how it's supposed to go, right? So it's moral injury. So we have to kind of be able to step back and say, okay, look, what did I do? I did everything the way I was trained. I did everything the way I was supposed to do, and the outcome is what it is what it is, right? And then you kind of walk yourself back through, would I change anything, right? And you talked yourself through it, and you walked yourself through it, and you talked to several different people, and hey, did you do what you were trained to do? Yeah. Then you did what you could do. And then we get a lot of people that are like, well, I don't understand. Then how does this happen? How did we get to this point? Why did they still die? And some people are always like, hey, tell me, and I'm like, I don't have the answer to that. And in those cases, it's okay for us to say, hey, I don't have the answer, because sometimes we don't. But you can rest assured, like, especially in your training, if you've done it the way that you're trained and the way you're supposed to, and then to fall back on that and say, hey, I did everything the way I was supposed to. But it sounds like Ed, you got a good support system. You're able to make some phone calls. I mean, call your wife and then just having somebody from dispatch reach out to you and reassure you. But I think that's what it's about, because sometimes, I think sometimes we do better at that now than we used to, but I think sometimes we still don't do the best we can when we follow up with people, especially in circumstances like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I used to didn't be that way. I used to just keep everything in, but that's not healthy either. And we teach our people that it's okay to reach out. If you're having an issue with this or that, and talk to somebody. Even if it's not me, talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I think I've even had deputies come to me, and I've sent them to you. I won't mention any names, but I'm sure you remember. Yeah. It's nice to know that they feel that they could come to me and share something that they're having a problem with, and because they don't know what outlet they can use to get through it, and I was able to direct them towards you.
Yeah, and a lot of times when they come and they sit down and you kind of walk through some stuff, it's like, surprisingly, a lot of people already know the answer, right? But it's just getting them that opportunity to kind of talk through themselves, and then they kind of get to that answer, that conclusion on their own. But it's just sometimes you kind of need that, you need a little bit of prompting to be able to do that, to where if you're just left to yourself, right, and you're just thinking about whatever the situation was or whatever the issue at hand is, and that's all you're doing, but you're not getting any type of making use of any type of resources, and you're just kind of either pushing it down and you're stowing it, or you're just kind of mulling it over and over and over yourself. Like, it's going to be this perpetual cycle. But kind of when you can sit down and kind of start actually talking it out with somebody, then some of that stuff kind of comes out, and then some of those light bulbs kick on, and they're like, they're able to kind of talk themselves through it.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Jason?
Yeah.
Well, I got an awkward one, but I don't know if I want to follow it, because it's pretty funny right after this one. After Ed's,
no, that's all right. I mean, if you want to share it, that kind of gets us, that kind of turns the ship a little bit. We kind of get out of the seriousness a little bit. I tell you, I had one a couple episodes back where the guy talked about a call for service where somebody complained about a domestic, and they get there and it wasn't a domestic. It was, some type of, weird sexapade kind of thing going on. And he's talking about this, goes in there and lays like in this contraption. And he said, so yeah, I mean,
Well, mine's not that awkward. I'll tell it just because there's one particular person that would probably enjoy me telling it. But so I started back in '05, and when I got hired on, of course, went through FTO. One of my FTOs was on a special unit, so he was kind of in and out, and his own partner would step in and train me. So I got to know this guy pretty well because I was with him quite a bit. So we, went through FTO. I went through FTO with him for whatever phase he had me in. Then worked with him for a couple years from time to time, and he ended up leaving law enforcement altogether, moved out of state. And then, so the years go by. Now I'm, probably 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years in. I'm an FTO training folks, and I see, I think my lieutenant was like, "Hey, can you come out to the O course and help run some new hires for their PT test?" So show up there, and I see this guy. He's back. I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he's getting a convertible BMW, and he's a big, tall dude. And I was like, "What the heck, man? You were like the GM of some, BMW dealership out there. You're coming back to do this." So long story short, exactly. So long story short, I'm now his trainee or his training officer. He's my trainee. So it's kind of like the grasshopper type scenario there. So it was great because it was the easiest training I ever had. I'd just sit in the car and be like, "All right, handle that. And when you're done, come back." So we get an alarm call, I think, in this rural area of the county we work, and go up this house, kind of walk around. We don't see anything. We don't, nobody's there. This is daytime in the afternoon. And after a few minutes being on scene, a neighbor, we think, comes over. And he's like, "Hey, this is my aunt's or grandma's house or whatever. The alarm company called me." And I was like, "All right, great. You got a key? We can just make sure." And he's like, "Yeah, I think there's one over here on the side of the house." So there's this big oak tree with an overhanging branch that's pretty low. And I'm walking behind this family member, down this path. And then my trainee is behind me. And the guy that shows up, he hits his head on the oak tree branch. I mean, he whacks it. Didn't even see, like he was looking down at his phone or something, just whacks it. So at the same time he whacks his head, I trip and I fall forward, and this little guy is out like this as I fall forward. Well, he's wearing like gym shorts, like just regular gym shorts. And I hook his waistband with my pinky as I'm falling down. And so he's holding his head because he just whacked his head. And now I'm pulling his pants down as I'm falling. And my trainee's standing behind me, just dying, laughing. It's the funniest thing he's ever seen in his life. So long story short, every time I see my old trainee, he gives me a little pinky. So that was pretty awkward because I pulled the guy's pants down.
That's a pretty funny story, and I know who you're talking about, and I can just see like uncontrollable big belly laughs coming from such a from an enormous individual. And then I can definitely see him giving you the old every time. I
mean, he's told everybody, like everybody he's ever worked with knows the story. He's like, that's the guy I was talking about. So.
That's pretty funny. That's good stuff. So as we kind of transition out of that, and I want to make sure we dive into your training group, but when we start looking at law enforcement in general, I'll throw two questions out, and you guys whoever wants to take it can take it. But what do you feel like we're doing? And Ed might jump on this one, and I'm not trying to step on your toes, but do you feel like when we're talking about new hires and bringing new people in, do you feel like we're doing a good enough job, with just across the board, not just at our agency, but just across the board, with training them for the job and getting them prepared and ready for, just the experiences and the career that they're jumping into. And then also, to those that are getting ready to retire, to our 15, 20, and 25 plus, individuals, what is some advice that you'd give them, as they're getting ready? They're kind of getting mid and then towards the end of their career.
Well, I'll start with the first one. With the new kids coming on. I'll say this: everything that we're doing now, we're doing everything that we can, or that we have the ability to do with the assets and the personnel that we have to do it. So the people that we have in training are doing an outstanding job and putting together the training curriculum and the actual training on the ground for the new hires. But they're, the generation gaps that we talk about, X generation, Y generation, all of that. Well, the generation coming out of the schools now, they're different than the generation previous. And so how they learn and those are all different hurdles that we have to overcome. I think we've tried really hard in the training unit, our training unit, to overcome that by bringing in some of those same generations to be instructors, because they've been with us for a little while and they understand the new generation coming in. Where guys like me, I don't understand the new generation. Why can't you do what I'm telling you to do? Or, you know what I'm saying? Hold on a second. Let me text you, and, kind of thing. It's just a gap that needed to be bridged. And I think we're doing that. We're doing the best we can at it. But how this new generation of officers learn and take in the concepts that we're trying to teach is different than what it used to be in the past. And so we have to evolve to meet that gap. And I think we're doing that. I think we can always do more. Training is one of those things that you can't stop. It's an evolution forward every day. There's something you can learn from anybody. And in this job, because the situations you face aren't mundane, they're not the same old thing every day. Every traffic stop could be a different is not going to be the same. You can't treat it the same. You have to go in there with your eyes open and head on a swivel. That doesn't change. But what you're facing downrange is never going to be exactly the same as what you faced just a few minutes ago or the day before. And training for that kind of environment is a tough thing to do, and to get people to understand that they just can't be complacent. That's one of the hardest things to teach right there, is complacency, because some days you get bored, and then the end of the week comes and you're ready for a weekend, and you've been bored all week doing just routine stuff, and then all of a sudden, bam, the hammer falls, and you're in a situation you haven't faced before. So what do? You got to fall back on your training, right? Well, you're always going to fall back on the lowest level of training you got. And so we try to push our training forward and stay current in everything that we do, and give the best training that we can to our people. And I think we've done a pretty good job.
Well, and I can add to that. I think that's one of the biggest progressions I've seen in my career here at the agency is recently, within, I'd say, the last 8 years or so, the desire to not just say what we've always done is good enough. Like, staying relevant, being open to new techniques, new ways to look at things, and not just being in our own bubble and saying, well, this is good enough. I mean, just some of the stuff that we've done in firearms, building clearing tactics and stuff like that. It's just, that we've rolled out in the last couple of years, is just like we always talk about. I mean, we're not trying to toot our own horns to ourselves, but we're like, man, we never got this level of training as a 1, 2, 3, 4-year deputy.
Yeah, we had to go outside the agency to get this level of training, then bring it back to the training division to do it. One of the things that I like to say, and I say it quite a bit to our training staff, hey, listen, if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we always got. So if you want to move forward and progress forward, you got to stay current, and you got to think that what we did yesterday was great for yesterday, but what do we need to do today to be great for today. You know, if we're always looking to make ourselves better than we were the day before, then I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that leads right into kind of what you guys are doing with your training group as well, right? You're wanting to give people the opportunity to be better than, where they're at currently. So, and I think that's huge. I think that, and I'll tell you, I mean, and I told you this, I told you this to to you, Ed, after firearms, this past year that, that this year was I thought was phenomenal, right? Just being able to kind of strip back to the basics and like, hey, let's focus in on like the fundamentals and make you a better, more proficient shooter. And if people listened and if they actually followed through with what you were teaching this year, they absolutely can dial in and be a better, more proficient shooter. Now, you're going to have the ones that are just going to go out there and they're going to do it just to do it because that's what we have to do. But then you're going to have those that are going to say, man, they're actually teaching they're teaching us some really good, useful stuff. So I'm going to apply it and I'm going to make myself, better than I was. And I think that's what we always have to do. Like, we could say, hey, we're top shelf, right? But you can always be better. I mean, that's, if you want to kind of put it into the context of, like your faith, and, you start looking at, like sanctification, right? It's the process of just becoming what? More, right? That's what you're doing. Like, we don't just stop. If you read through the Bible and, and you've read through cover to cover, you don't just say, okay, and stop, right? You go back and, yeah. And you read it some more, right? And it's like, when you look at it from a Christian standpoint, like the sanctification is the process of becoming more Christ-like. And like, that's our goal in life, is to be more Christ. We're never going to get to that point this side of heaven because that's just not going to happen. Right? But we always strive for that. And that's how we should go about anything in life, right? We should always be striving to be better than who we were the day before. But I think there's so many of us, we just kind of get stuck in that complacency bubble. And you talk about it, like, we just get complacent, like, oh, okay, well, I did my firearms this year. I did my DTAC this year. I checked that box, and, unfortunately there's some people like, I don't have to, touch my gun again until next year at qualifications. And that shows
that kind of thought process bothers me, but I do understand though that life happens. There are things that do get in the way to keep you from going to that next level the next day to be better than you were the day before, because life happens and things get in the way. But you have to, part of what we were talking about earlier about decompressing and you have to make time for yourself to get that. You have to be dedicated and have that professional discipline, especially in this job, to take the next step to be better than you were the day before.
Yeah, and I know I threw another question out there, but I kind of want to table that because I want to give you guys the opportunity to kind of dive into your training group more. So Parabellum training group, and I can put I can put some of that information in the show notes, like your guys' Facebook page or your website or whatever, so people can go there and check it out. So you kind of saw the need, you saw the gap that with training, and I completely agree with that because I've talked to individuals like, oh yeah, I got my carry conceal, and they went and they kind of showed us. We all took our firearm and they said, okay, hey, this is the basics, and then we shot 5 times, and they gave us our certificate, and they sent us on our way. And like, we were there maybe 3 hours, maybe 4, and I'm like,
yeah,
all right. So now we have this individual who feels completely competent in their ability to carry a concealed weapon. So from that standpoint, I mean, you probably saw like, hey, there's a deficiency here. Let's do better. Let's do better.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to get into opinion about law and all that, but in all reality, these guys that were doing those minimum standard training things, they were within the letter of the law. And, to me, you know, you got to take the initiative as a citizen, or as, a law enforcement officer or whoever. If you're going to take that liability and that responsibility on to carry a firearm to protect yourself and protect others, then you better be dang sure proficient in it and be able to take, a high risk, high liability shot when it's needed, because you don't get to pick the time the gunfight happens. You know what I mean? You don't get to determine where it occurs and who you're with and what gun you have with you. I mean, you can determine that, but what the other guys got. So that's kind of our mindset when we do these trainings and do these classes, is we want people to understand that it's not just, it's fun. I love shooting. It's one of the most fun things I do, but it's also, there's a serious aspect to it, especially with the guys that work with us and they're in the same profession with us. And I try to drive that home, even on the detention side. We hear this a lot of times. They don't want to shoot. They're not into it. They lock their gun up before they go in the jail, and they're in the jail all day long. But I'm like, you wear a uniform in public that has the same badge as everybody else does. The general citizen doesn't know that you're a detention deputy, and it doesn't matter. You're sworn. You're issued a firearm. You need to be proficient with it. And again, there's plenty of guys that have been off duty in uniform that've had to handle stuff. So I understand to a point, but also, like, this is a part of your job, just like, being able to physically do your job, being able to, write proper reports. All that stuff's part of it. You can't just say, well, I'm going to neglect this one thing. And I was harping on the guys today. We did some runs through our shoot house and our less lethal shoot house. And I'm like, guys, if you're feeling good about your shot placement and your movements, like, you weren't in the same room with me, and I don't want you to ever be like, man, we just crushed it and that's it. I want you to go, hey, I can work on this. I need to work on this. Like, I tell guys, the new hires, they high fiving each other after they pass a firearms qual. I'm like, bro, you've passed it, yeah, but that's a minimum qualification. And your shot group was like this, right? And nobody was holding the timer to you. Like, if you think that's good, yeah, you need to really, readjust your thought process. So with what we teach to the guys we work with and the civilians is fundamentals, mastering and fundamentals. We do a lot of stuff dry. Like, people will show up to our classes, and I'll tell them every time, like, class starts at 9:00 in the morning, and they ain't fired a single round at 11:00. And I'm like, would you think that you'd be here for 2 hours and not fire a single round? And every one of them was like, nope, but I'm glad we didn't. We worked out a lot of stuff without firing a single round. And we preach that. I mean, I spend minimum 10 minutes a day driving.
And the effort shows when they do start firing.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're going, wow. It's not just firearms that we teach. I mean, we teach every aspect of it. I think from rifle to pistol, from applying the fundamentals, which is the basics, to intermediate and more of an immersion level course for, your people that have mastered the fundamentals and can apply them accurately and quickly. And we do that with the rifle too, but we also, some of the other things that we're looking to put on are land navigation for search and rescue courses, TACMED courses, anything out there that people are looking for. One of the things that we also see a need for, and we are actually putting together some plans for a couple of different churches, is security assessments, and in that process, providing being able to provide training for their armed security teams and stuff like that, which has been pretty successful so far.
Yeah, I mean, this year's been, I'd say, 80+% of our clientele has been church-based security team members. Maybe they're not necessarily on the team already, but they have the desire to be more proficient and get on it. So it's been great. I mean, I've never had a student since 2016 that was just an unknown person to me. I either knew somebody that knew them, they came recommended, and I kind of like keeping it that way. It's either all law enforcement or I got to know somebody that knows you. For what we do, the liability that we take on, it's the way I like to do it, and Ed's the same way. So I mean, I've been blessed to have Ed jump on board this year and really, have that wealth of knowledge. I mean, this guy's, book is this thick of stuff he gets certified to teach that he was lucky enough to get Uncle Sam to pay for over 20 years in the Army.
Yeah.
So it's been great.
Yeah, and I think that especially when you start talking about church security, unfortunately, I think that's that's something that's going to be more relevant here, and probably sooner than later. I think there's definitely there's a place for that. Kind of funny story. There's a guy who used to go to our church, and he talking about oh yeah, I carry a gun, and pulls it out of his pocket, right? It's stuffed in his pocket inside a sock. I'm like, it's an interesting choice of
Nice holster.
Yeah,
Stay warm.
So it's like there definitely is out there. There's a level of deficiency that definitely is there and is needed. So, but it kind of goes back to if people are willing to do it, right? If they're willing to put the time in, put the work in, and to better themselves. And that's what it is. Like, we can provide all these resources. You guys can provide all this training. Even at the agency, we can up our training level, but it's up to the individual to apply that and to better themselves. It's just like when we talk about resources, for their mental, emotional, spiritual well-being and their overall wellness. It's like you can provide all those resources and you can say, hey, this is what we have, this is what's available. We can't make them make use of it, right? At some point, they've got to get to the idea in themselves, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to make use of this. I'm going to make use of what's available to me, and I'm going to better myself. And I'll say that I think that in the last several years, I mean, our agency has jumped forward significantly just across the board. And I think that we do a lot better job preparing our people and providing resources for our people. And if individuals don't see that, I think it's just because they just don't want to see it, or they just have, they're just have a reason why they don't want to see it, right? Whether there's some type of disgruntledness there, or whatever it may be. But I think that we've done an incredibly good job, moving forward. So,
well, I like to say it's always better to have and not need, and a need not have. And the more hopeless people become in this world, especially those that don't have a strong faith-based background, the more I don't think it's a matter of if anymore. It's just a matter of when these things happen. It could happen to any of us, and if we're not prepared to handle those things, in an accurate, quick, and expedient manner, without harming somebody else or the background, you're setting yourself up for failure if you don't prepare yourself.
Well, and that's what we've seen with the clients we've been working with this past years. There's no lack of heart and desire and want to protect their church and their family there at the church. But we've been lucky enough that we've had plenty of them that recognize that they're not at that level, and they're reaching out to receive that training to give them more confidence to do so. Because, just as helpful as you can be with a gun in an incident like that, you can be just as harmful and a liability if you're not confident in what you're doing.
Well, we've had a bunch of deputies, in the intermediate pistol courses that we've been teaching, have come back and said, I really didn't realize that I needed more work than what I thought I was better than what I really am.
There was a lot of hurt egos showing up thinking that they were at this level, and within 5 minutes of the first day, they were realizing that they weren't quite where they thought they were. So, because they hadn't been pushed,
Yeah.
So
it's a whole lot different than standing up and on a static range and, taking your time and just kind of gauging the wind and taking that shot, and making it the best, perfect, pretty little shot you can take. Then when we say, okay, let's performance on demand.
Yep.
Ready, set, go. And, they missed. It's because they didn't put the fundamentals together.
Yeah. Sure.
So to kind of wrap up our time, just kind of one last thing I want to jump on is when you guys look back over your careers, how much has your faith played, a role in where you're at today?
For me, well, I'd be honest. I mean, every day, is a new day, and I'm probably the worst one out there. I believe in Christ. I believe in my personal Lord and Savior, and I've known that from a long time ago, 1985, and every day is a different day. I don't always do it the right way. I fall short all the time.
Oh yeah.
My faith has been it has saved my life more than once. In this job and my job in the military, without it, I wouldn't be here today. Just put it that way. So tremendous amount.
Yeah. And to kind of none of us are going to get it right each and every day. I mean, even in my role, I mean, there's days where I'm like, man, I'm better. I know I'm better than that, but we all struggle, right? We all fall short, but I think it's, just knowing that and understanding that, but then continuing, like we've talked about this whole time, continuing to strive to be better than we are, especially better than we were the day before. Doesn't mean we're going to, exceed that by leaps and bounds. It might just be, hey, you know what? I took 4 steps back today, so tomorrow it might be 1 step forward. But I think it's that continual process of just trying to always be better than we were the day before.
I agree.
I think just giving me kind of a reference point, like I'm probably worse than Ed when it comes to that, but since I can remember as a child, I mean, I've known the story of the Lord and what needs to be done or what He expects. So it's just for me, it's just a reference point, and it's we raise our kids, that way. So, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I don't know any different. So it's kind of like, you just know that's the way, and sometimes you don't hit it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even, we look back at the New Testament, and when we read through it, we see, there's even Peter, referred to as this rock, right? You're the rock I'm going to build my church upon, and it's like he definitely messed up, and but that's, we're all going to mess up, but we just have to continue to strive, to be better each and every day. But I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and just kind of share some of your guys' experiences and your knowledge, but also just talk about your training group, what you guys are doing, what you're offering. And I'll put that in the show notes, and that way, if anybody wants to to get on Facebook or do you guys have an actual website or just Facebook?
Parabellumtraininggroup.org.
Okay, all right. I'll put that on there. That way, they can go and they can kind of look through there and see if there's anything that they want to jump into. But I appreciate you guys. Appreciate taking the time. So
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and share this resource with your fellow officers. The goal of Critical Aspects is to serve, support, and sustain the law enforcement professionals. So head over to www.criticalaspects.org for more resources and information. And as always, God bless and be safe.